When I think back to my childhood, the first image that comes to mind is a dining table, set neatly with plates, glasses, and cutlery. There was always laughter, the clinking of silverware, the aroma of food filling the air. But what stands out most vividly is the empty chair. My chair. It was there, pulled back slightly as if waiting, but it never truly belonged to me. I would linger at the doorway, half in shadow, watching my family eat together while I was told to wait, or worse, that there simply wasn't enough. I learned to stay quiet, to accept scraps, to find my own corner where hunger became as much a companion as loneliness. They never realized how deeply it cut. Not the hunger in my stomach, but the ache of being unwanted at the table. Every plate they filled without me became a silent message. You are not worth serving. But hunger has a strange way of teaching patience. In those long, empty evenings, I began to realize that absence can plant seeds. I absorbed every detail of how food brought people together, how it was more than nourishment. It was power. And while my chair stayed empty, a fire inside me grew. I promised myself that one day I would sit at the head of a table no one could pull away from me. One day I would own more than a seat. I would own the table itself. And when my family sat down to eat without me again, they would never guess whose name was written on the papers that kept the lights on, the kitchens running, and the bills paid. Growing up, hunger followed me everywhere, not just in the kitchen at home, but in the hallways of school, in the silence of birthdays that were never celebrated, in the way my name was never called when cake was cut. At school, I was the child with secondhand shoes and an empty lunchbox, borrowing excuses instead of meals. Teachers noticed, but rarely asked. Classmates noticed, but never cared. At home, the story was the same. If there was money for a small feast, it was shared among them while I pretended not to mind. On my birthdays, I often sat by the window, watching candles flicker in other houses, telling myself, someday, I would buy my own cake. The first real chance to taste belonging came when I was old enough to work. My first job was washing dishes at a small diner, tucked on a corner that smelled like fried onions and coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but to me, it was a kingdom. I watched people eat, strangers laughing together, families sharing meals, and I realized something my parents never taught me. Food has the power to connect, to heal, to make people feel seen. Each plate I scrubbed was a lesson, each tip I saved a step closer to a future I couldn't yet name. While my family dismissed me as useless, I was learning in silence, stacking pennies, absorbing lessons no classroom could teach. They never knew that the girl they starved of affection was quietly feeding her own ambition. And one night, when I stumbled across a ledger showing my parents drowning in debts they refused to acknowledge, I understood. Their hunger for control would one day be their undoing, and my chance to claim everything they denied me. It happened on an ordinary evening, one I might have forgotten, if not for the wound it carved into me. I had finished my shift at the diner, smelling of soap and grease, my pockets heavy with a few crumpled bills. As I walked home through the glow of neon lights, I passed a restaurant window. Warm, golden, alive with chatter. And there they were, my family. My mother's laugh rang out, my father raised a glass, my siblings leaned in close, sharing dishes that steamed under the light. Their faces glowed with comfort, their plates overflowing, their table alive with abundance. I froze on the sidewalk, rain dripping from my hair, watching from the other side of the glass like I always had. They hadn't told me. They hadn't even thought to ask. My stomach tightened, but it wasn't hunger this time. It was something sharper, colder. I pressed my hand to the window just for a moment, but no one turned. To them, I didn't exist. To me, they were a portrait of everything I was denied. I turned away before the tears could fall, walking fast into the night. But in my mind, I stayed at that window. That image burned itself into me. My family full and me forgotten. And in that pain, a seed of resolve broke open. Someday, I promised myself, this very restaurant, or one like it, would not just seat me, it would belong to me. One day, I would make sure they ate in my presence, under my rules, and never again would I stand outside, looking in. They thought I was invisible that night. What they didn't know was that they had given me a vision, one I would stop at nothing to make real. The night I finally spoke up was not planned. It was born out of years of silence cracking open like glass under pressure. I came home late from another shift, exhausted, only to find them at the table again, eating as though I didn't exist. Something inside me snapped. For years, I had swallowed my words, swallowed my pain, swallowed the bitterness like medicine I was told would make me stronger. But that night, I let it spill. I asked them why. Why was there never a plate for me? Why was I treated as less than blood, less than family? Their answers were as cruel as their neglect. My father's voice, sharp as a knife, "You're too weak, too useless. Why waste a meal on you?" My mother didn't defend me. My siblings laughed softly, as if my pain was nothing more than entertainment. And in that moment, I realized there was no chair waiting for me at their table. Not now, not ever. I felt the sting of tears, but I didn't let them see me break. Instead, I stood up, my hands trembling, and I told them the one truth they never expected to hear. One day, I'll build my own table, and you will beg for a seat at it. They laughed louder then, dismissing me like they always had. But I walked out the door, my heart pounding, my pockets nearly empty, and yet, for the first time, I felt rich because I carried something they could never take from me. Hunger, sharpened into ambition. That was the night I stopped waiting for an invitation. That was the night I promised myself I would never come back to this table again. Not as their forgotten child, only as their reckoning. After I left that night, the anger was only the first draft. What followed was work, slow, stubborn, and deliberate, the kind that turns a wound into a plan. I started with the basics. Nights at the diner turned into early mornings cataloging receipts, practicing simple bookkeeping on the back of napkins, learning how profit hid in plain sight. I read every free business pamphlet I could find, listened to radio interviews with restaurateurs while I scrubbed plates, and memorized the difference between gross and net like a prayer. I saved tips in a tin beneath my mattress until clinking coins sounded like a tiny, hopeful orchestra. I took classes, 2 hours here, a weekend workshop there, anything that taught me systems, supply chains, vendor negotiations, staffing ratios. I volunteered for extra shifts, watching managers move like conductors, noting how they scheduled the cooks, how they priced specials to move inventory, how a smile at the right time could change a complaint into a compliment. I learned to read menus as blueprints, what ingredients cost, what dishes sold, which items were smoke and which were substance. Outside of work, I drew literal blueprints, layouts for a kitchen that flowed, seating that felt intimate but profitable, a back of house that breathed efficiency. I sketched the facade, warm wood, soft lighting, a sign that said welcome, not look how much we spent. I made lists of likely suppliers, of permit requirements, of fonts that felt honest. When money was tight, I bartered. A week of late shifts for a used espresso machine, a few freshly baked loaves for a discount on produce. I found mentors, older women who'd built bakeries from basements, an ex-chef who gave blunt, priceless advice while sipping coffee, and I soaked up their blunt truths. I learned to hide my rage in spreadsheets and to let ambition speak in neat columns. Every setback taught me discipline. A failed vendor deal taught me contract clauses. A burned batch taught me temperature control. A rude landlord taught me negotiation tactics. Slowly, pennies became piles, plans became proposals, proposals became a business plan I could pitch without trembling. I opened a small accounts book in my own name, not to announce myself, but to prove I could keep score. I practiced walking into banks and asking for microloans until the words didn't shake. At night, I read legalese until the jargon no longer intimidated me. By day, I practiced the hospitality of a woman who knew how to listen. The blueprint wasn't just architecture or finance. It was a moral architecture. How to be uncompromising with resources, yet generous where it mattered. How to run a place that fed people and made them feel seen, while also protecting the lines on a balance sheet. Most importantly, I built redundancy. A plan B, a plan C, an exit strategy for when things went sideways. I didn't want reckless revenge. I wanted inevitable, elegant reparation, an institution so sound that when my family finally sat down under its lights, the ownership papers would speak louder than any apology. The day I opened my first cafe, it wasn't grand, it was small, almost hidden. The kind of place most people walked past without noticing. A narrow storefront with secondhand tables, mismatched chairs, and paint that still smelled faintly of effort. But to me, it was a kingdom. I remember turning the key in the lock that morning, my hands trembling not with fear, but with something sharper: ownership. For once, the place was mine. Not borrowed, not begged for, not stolen from scraps. Mine. The first customers trickled in slowly. A man with a newspaper who ordered coffee black, two students splitting a single plate of fries, an elderly woman who stayed longer than her cup should have allowed, her eyes grateful for the warmth of a place that didn't rush her. Every coin they handed over felt heavier than gold. I kept my smile professional, but inside I was dizzy with power. I wasn't just serving food. I was creating a space, a belonging, something that I had been denied all my life. Running the cafe taught me more than any class ever could. I learned how to stretch ingredients into endless variations, how to manage staff who looked to me for leadership, how to calm down a customer with a bad day, and how to spot regulars who wanted more than just coffee. They wanted comfort. I made mistakes, of course. A shipment of milk spoiled because I forgot to check temperatures. A new recipe bombed so badly that even I couldn't force down a bite. But mistakes became lessons, and lessons became muscle memory. Slowly, profits began to grow. A little extra in the till meant I could repaint the walls, replace the flickering light bulbs, buy chairs that didn't wobble. The place started to hum with life. Word spread faster than I imagined. Soon, the cafe was buzzing. Students with laptops, mothers with toddlers, workers grabbing meals on breaks. I created a dish inspired by the meals my family used to enjoy without me, tweaking it until it became the cafe's signature. Irony tasted sweet when customers praised it, never knowing it was born from the flavor of rejection. Every plate that left the kitchen was more than food. It was proof that I was no longer invisible. And yet, even in those moments of triumph, I felt a deeper hunger stirring. The cafe was thriving, yes, but it was still small, still a whisper compared to the laughter I once overheard through a restaurant window. I realized I didn't just want to run a cafe. I wanted to run the restaurant, the kind of place families bragged about, where reservations were fought over, where my name wasn't just on the lease, but on the lips of every satisfied guest. The cafe gave me my first taste of power, and it was intoxicating. But like any hunger, the more I fed it, the sharper it grew. I didn't just want to be seen. I wanted to be unignorable. By the time the cafe had carved its place in the city's rhythm, I knew it was only the beginning. My eyes had always been fixed on a bigger target. The restaurant where I once stood outside in the rain, watching my family feast without me. I didn't want to simply compete with it. I wanted to own it. Quietly. Completely. The opportunity came in whispers. One of my suppliers mentioned that the restaurant's owners were struggling with debts, the kind that make even proud men whisper behind closed doors. Their glossy dining room and polished wine glasses hid the truth. The business was bleeding. That news hit me like lightning. For years, I had been stacking coins, building credit, and nurturing relationships with investors who respected my discipline. I had no reason to think I could buy into a restaurant that had once seemed untouchable, except one. I refused to accept limits. I approached carefully, never revealing my full name. Through a lawyer, I began negotiations, presenting myself as part of a small investment group. The owners, desperate but wary, didn't ask too many questions. They only saw a lifeline. I signed documents in dim offices with stale coffee, my heart pounding as pen met paper. Each signature was a quiet declaration: this place is mine now. Not loudly, not publicly, but silently, like a storm brewing far from sight. No one knew, not even my staff at the cafe. I kept my face calm, even as I walked past the restaurant's glowing windows at night, watching strangers dine under lights that were now powered by my money. I had controlling shares before my family ever realized someone new was at the helm. The irony was almost unbearable. The same place where they once left me standing on the sidewalk now answered to me. But ownership, I discovered, is more than ink on contracts. It is strategy. I stayed invisible on purpose. I allowed the old managers to remain, the menus to stay familiar, the staff to feel secure. I knew too much disruption would draw attention, and attention was the last thing I wanted. Not yet. I became the silent partner, pulling strings from behind the curtain, redirecting profits, reshaping debts, and strengthening the foundation brick by brick. No one suspected the quiet architect was me. And then fate handed me a gift wrapped in delicious irony. My family began dining there more often. They loved the restaurant, bragged about its dishes, laughed around its tables, never once knowing that every bite they savored was delivered under my ownership. They were feeding on my labor, my patience, my revenge. I would sit in my office above the dining room sometimes, the muted sound of their voices rising through the floorboards, and I would smile, not bitterly, but with satisfaction. I was no longer the child watching from the window. I was the owner they never saw coming, the silent hand writing the bills they so casually signed. And soon, I knew, the silence would break. There's a strange kind of poetry in life, the way pain circles back, dresses itself in irony, and serves itself cold on a silver plate. By then, my ownership of the restaurant was no longer a secret to lawyers, managers, or my quiet circle of advisors, but to the world outside, I was still invisible. And so it felt like destiny the night my family reserved their favorite table, the corner one, near the window, where chandeliers cast a golden glow across polished cutlery. The same table I had once seen them crowd around from the sidewalk while I stood dripping in the rain. I arrived early that evening, not as a guest, but as the owner. From the office above the dining room, I could see everything. I leaned against the railing, listening to the muffled clinks of glasses, the hum of voices, the symphony of a place I had rebuilt with my bare hands. And then, like a scene replayed from memory, they walked in. My father, confident stride as if he owned the world. My mother, delicate smile, perfected for appearances. My siblings, chattering, phones buzzing with their small victories. They sat down at their table as though it belonged to them. They didn't know they were entering my stage. The waiters greeted them with warmth. I had trained them that way. Plates of appetizers arrived, the aromas filling the air. each dish crafted from recipes I had chosen. They laughed, praised the flavors, waved for more wine. From where I stood, I could see everything. The comfort on their faces, the ease of belonging. It was the exact ease I had been denied as a child. But now, the power had shifted. They were dining on my investment, my labor, my vision. Every bite they took, every toast they raised, was under my name, even if they didn't see it. I could have stormed down right then, thrown the truth onto their plates like a dish too hot to swallow. But revenge is sweeter when it simmers. So I waited, savoring the moment, every second stretched long and deliberate. I instructed the manager to make sure their service was flawless, the kind of evening that would make them return again and again. Because I wanted them to love it, to praise it, to feel proud of it, so that when the truth came, the fall would be sharper. As I watched them clink their glasses, a strange calm filled me. I was no longer the outcast at the door. I was the owner of the house. The walls, the lights, the tablecloth beneath their hands, it all belonged to me. They thought they were simply enjoying a night out. They had no idea they were guests in my empire. And as the bill quietly made its way toward them, with my name stamped in black ink at the bottom, I knew the silence I had lived in for so long was about to shatter. The moment of truth came not with thunder, but with the quiet rustle of a receipt. I had been watching from above as the waiter laid the bill gently on the corner of their table. My father slid it toward him with the same arrogance he had carried my entire life, glancing at the total with only mild irritation. But then his brow furrowed. His finger tapped the paper once, twice. My mother leaned closer, squinting at the line that bore the restaurant's ownership stamp. My name. Bold, undeniable, printed in ink they couldn't erase. At first, they thought it was a mistake. My siblings laughed nervously, brushing it off, muttering that clerks often get things wrong. But my father's hand trembled as he pushed back his chair. "Get the manager," he barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the soft music playing overhead. The waiter bowed, disappearing into the back. Exactly as I had instructed, because the manager that night was me. I took my time. Every step down the staircase from my office was deliberate, the sound of my heels striking wood echoing like a drum roll. Their voices drifted upward, confusion, disbelief, irritation rowing by the second. And then, as I turned the corner into the dining room, their faces froze. For a long moment, silence hung heavier than the chandeliers above us. I didn't rush to explain. I let them see me, the daughter they had dismissed, ignored, starved of affection, now standing tall, dressed not in rags of rejection, but in the authority of ownership. I pulled the company badge from my blazer pocket, the one etched with my name and title, and placed it gently on their table, right beside the untouched bill. "This," I said softly, my voice carrying more weight than a shout ever could, "is my restaurant." Their reactions unfolded like a play. My mother's lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. My siblings looked at one another as though they were trapped in some cruel joke. My father's face hardened, his pride crumbling behind eyes that had never once looked at me with respect. No one laughed now. No one dared. The staff moved around us gracefully, as if nothing monumental had just occurred. Glasses were refilled, desserts served at nearby tables, music playing on. To the other diners, it was just another evening. But at that table, for my family, the ground had shifted beneath their feet. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My presence, my badge, my silence, all of it was enough. For years, they had left me outside looking in. Now they were sitting in a restaurant whose walls, lights, and very heartbeat answered to me. And as I stood there, watching the shock settle into their bones, I felt the final thread of hunger snap inside me. I wasn't starving anymore. They were. The night didn't end with applause, nor with dramatic words exchanged. It ended quietly, almost eerily so. My family finished their meal in silence, the weight of truth pressing down on them heavier than any dish placed before them. They couldn't even look at me, not directly. Their forks scraped against plates, their once lively chatter now replaced by a suffocating stillness. For years, I had craved their recognition, a single sign that I belonged at their table. And now, as they sat eating in a restaurant built with my vision, my labor, my name, they finally saw me. But it wasn't pride that filled their eyes. It was regret. When the waiter returned for the bill, my father pushed it toward me without a word. That single gesture spoke volumes. He wasn't paying. He couldn't. Not because he lacked money, but because pride had drained from him, like blood from an open wound. I picked up the slip, tucked it away, and smiled faintly. For once, I wasn't the burden. I was the provider, the unseen architect of their comfort. And they knew it. After they left, I lingered in the dining hall. The chairs were being stacked, the lights dimmed one by one, the scent of food fading into the quiet hum of closing time. I sat at the same table they had just occupied, resting my hand on the spot where I had placed my badge, the same badge that had turned an ordinary dinner into a reckoning. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stood in doorways, too hungry to speak, too small to be noticed. I thought about the empty chair at my childhood table, the echo of laughter that had excluded me. That girl had grown into a woman who no longer begged for space. I hadn't just claimed a seat, I had built the entire table. And yet victory tasted bittersweet. Revenge had its glow, but beneath it lay something else, a quiet ache that even success couldn't erase. I had proven them wrong, yes. I had shattered every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every time they chose to eat without me. But part of me still wished they had chosen differently, that they had saved me a plate, that they had loved me before I became untouchable. The truth is, regret doesn't always belong to those who hurt you. Sometimes it lingers in you, too. Not because you still crave their approval, but because you wonder how life might have been if love had been given freely, instead of earned through empire. As I rose from the table and walked toward the door, the night air wrapped around me like a reminder. My story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. About turning hunger into power, absence into ownership, rejection into resilience. And though my family left with the aftertaste of regret heavy on their tongues, I walked away with something they could never take back: freedom.